like and subscribe. Now. What's the worst thing you've ever heard a teacher say at school? I was at rugby practice and we were doing stretches and we were all lying on the ground and my friend has his head positioned close to my other friend's crotch. My friend says quite loudly, "It looks like you're about to suck my dick." When he realized that our coach, who is also a teacher at our school, heard him, he started to apologize for swearing. When our coach says he wants a meal not a snack. Used to have an alcoholic teacher who, when handing out textbooks, slammed one down in front of a larger boy in our class, pointed at him, and said, "Don't eat it." Yeah, the kid cried. My 8th grade science teacher would pick on this one girl in the front row. One time he was going to make a joke about her breath being so bad he could see it. Instead he said, "I can see your breasts," to a 14-year-old girl. Ah, Mr. Tidsman. Chemistry teacher that got annoyed easily with my class specifically. "Alright, F this. You're all going to fail this exam." People in my class would never shut up, and it was the last week of school, so he was just done with us. TBH, I can understand the teacher. I was in pretty much the same situation. One year our class was so bad, the teacher left after that year to go to another school in another city. I was a metalhead with long hair. In the 9th grade my algebra teacher, who was working on his 3rd DUI, told me that I dodged before I ever graduated. I sent him an invite to my graduation. I mentioned how I hadn't dodged. He no-showed, but one of my other teachers came, told me what an a-hole that guy was and that he'd be sure to ask him why he couldn't make the graduation, just to rub it in a little. Age of 9. Lost my father in a horrific accident. I returned to school a few days later, and after attendance was taken the teacher said to me in front of the class got together and sent flowers to your father's funeral. I paid your share, so make sure you bring in $2 to more hours I need to be paid back. She then went on with the lessons. As many have asked what happened, I asked to see the school nurse and was sent home. Once home I told my mother. Returning to school 2 days later I never saw the teacher again. I don't know how my mother handled it. The F. Same. This is just WTF. You don't make a kid pay for his own father's funeral flowers. This teacher is stupid. What the actual F-I-N-F? What is this WTF? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Who would do that? What did you do? What did your mum say? I asked to go see the nurse. She sent me home, and once home I told my mother. I don't know what happened, but I didn't take any money to school, and the teacher wasn't there. When I returned 2 days later, "Teacher, so will you miss the rest of this week just like last week?" Me. My dad was in hospice. "Sorry it took him so long." Teacher. Heart visibly sinks into stomach, and face drops. At least he realized he was wrong. Ha. At least your teacher had the decency to be shamed. My school administration took me to truancy court. I missed a week of work at my part-time job. Full-time job let me take my time. Because of my mom suddenly dying, I got a message saying, "When are you coming back? The show must go on." That was pretty shitty to hear from a place I'd worked at for 6 years. Wow, teachers really are underpaid. This one English teacher at my school once told a black kid to read a passage in some slavery novel, to read it blacker. It got on the news, and she eventually just quit. She also moved into my apartment building, and I occasionally run into her, which is pretty funny. In UK, year 11th, age 15 over 16. An English literature teacher once told my class, "Polar bears almost exclusively eat penguins." I was not good at literature, but I was good at science subjects, and I was not this teacher's favorite pupil. So when she said this, I quite quickly argued back, saying that she was wrong. She protested, and I explained that polar bears live in that Arctic Ocean, and while there are various species of penguin, none of them live in the northern hemisphere. This was an open argument during class, and she offered to Google the answer. So she did, and when I was proven correct by the internet, she sent me out the class. As a teacher, this crap infuriates me. If a kid proves me wrong, I openly admit it and give them kudos for doing it. Throwing a kid out because they stood up for what they know is right because you're too insecure to let a teenager prove you wrong is the kind of thing that makes kids hate school. I just wish I was effing dead. Overheard by complete chance while wandering the corridors during a free period, turned right back around and took the long route, so I wouldn't have to walk past the classroom. It was a bit of a broken pedestal moment for me, but I never told anyone else about it. The teacher who said it was one of our most beloved history teachers, who we later found out had been stopped from committing suicide at least twice by one of the deputy heads, who'd been friends with him since their university days in the past. Not stopped as in talked things out and convinced him it wasn't the best way to deal with his problems, but as in physically picked up and dragged away from the window. The deputy head was quite intimidating as a teacher, but we gained a lot of respect for him after learning that. Damn. Not really the worst, but once in high school my teacher legitimately asked the blind girl in our class why she wasn't going up to check her grade on the grade sheet. I have a friend with bilateral cochlear implants. That is, he was born deaf and still has less than average hearing with the implants. Well, back in high school, he was in several of my classes. Stand-up guy, really nice, yada yada. Anyway, one day, one of our teachers asks him some banal question. Here's a transcript of the following interaction. Friend, what? Teacher, repeats question. Friend, sorry, what? Teacher, jokingly what? Are you deaf or something? Friend, yes. Teacher looks horrified. Entire class and friend start dying laughing. Teacher apologizes profusely. Luckily, she was actually a super nice lady and basically forgot my friend was, in fact, deaf without his implants. This is the thing that teacher's brain will randomly dig up at 2 AM for some sleepless self-cringing. Forever. Joke's on you. The teacher had her grade written in braille, like they just printed out the dots in ink, and not traced at all. She probably didn't mean to be mean. I once had a blind man ask me if I could show him the door at the train station, and I pointed and said of course it's right over there, fully knowing he was blind. Sometimes your brain just F's you over. How dare you write that? You're practically emotionally handicapped. It's psychopathic. Said to me at 12, not even half a year after my mom died. She made us write an essay about our home life, which in retrospect was a fed up excuse to snoop into my situation, and didn't like how I used humor to cope. So she pulled me out of the class to yell at me for 5 minutes for not being sad enough. I don't even remember what I wrote besides cracking some jokes about my dad's outfits. My best friend lost her dad to cancer when she was 12 and her mom taught her to use humor to cope. She likes to tell people he died and then ask them if they want to see a picture of her and her dad, and then she shows them a picture of her smiling next to his tombstone. Her mom died in February. They cremated her, put her in a wine bottle, and threw her at the Las Vegas sign. We make jokes about how nuts she was LMAO. Probably the best way to cope with death is laugh at it. I hope someone throws a pickle jar of my ashes at the Seattle gum wall. Not all Mexicans are from Mexico. Some are from El Salvador. BCOM professor. My history teacher called himself Big Daddy. My history teacher called me the door bee because I let students into the class. My homeroom teacher liked saying only loose women and whores hang out at doors. My HS Gov teacher told me I was faking an autoimmune illness and that I'd never make it anywhere with my laserness. She was trash. F her. My school nurse sophomore year of high school thought I was faking illness to get out of gym class, my favorite class. Turns out I had undiagnosed cons that got worse and worse through the year until I could barely walk without exhaustion. Hey, I have cons too. But I once had a teacher that told me I didn't have rheumatoid arthritis BC I was too young. I was like, well, that's not what my doctor said, and she replied, well, doctors will say anything for you to come back. My friend had to stop me from saying anything as she could see how mad I was. I always got yelled at in front of class if I missed her class due to illness or doctor appointments. I still got an A but geez. But a lot of my teachers said something about missing all the time for doctor appointments. Ended up missing about 200 days, but still graduated with a 4.1 GPA. Like grown adults would say about me to other students for missing their class. Sorry I went on a rant, but it was frustrating. My science teacher in 7th grade called a Mexican kid in my class a fence hopper once during the middle of class. In the same vein, I had a high school teacher that nicknamed everyone. His name for my friend from Syria was Green Card. My culinary teacher in high school did this. He straight up called me Pablo, even though that wasn't my name simply because I was Hispanic. He called the Middle Eastern kid terrorist and the redneck kid Nasker. I wish I was joking. We had a huge influx of Hispanic kids in 5th grade. There was a lot of cultural tension from the adults, though us kids really didn't care all that much. Anyway, one of the teachers insisted on calling all the Hispanic kids anglicized versions of their names. Example, Juan would be John. There was one girl named Rosalinda, and she insisted we all just call her Linda, because Rosa isn't an English name. I had a teacher stand me up in front of the class and have them say stupid in unison. That really did a lot for my 5th grade self-esteem, especially considering my dad was in rehab at the time and the reason I was called stupid was I lost my homework at said rehab visiting him. Jokes on her though. I'm an accomplished scientist today despite that terrible chain of events. This wasn't said directly to me, but in middle school I had a teacher grab me from the lunch table and drag me to the principal's office. After grilling me for a while and telling me I know what I did, they finally revealed to me that the teacher stated she witnessed me suggestively sucking my thumb while staring at a female friend of mine. I was just biting my nail. I had something kinda similar happen. I moved from Ohio to Iowa during middle school. One day I was wearing an Ohio State Buckeye shirt. One of my teachers grabbed me and dragged me to principal's office. When I asked what was going on, she told me I knew exactly what I did. I had no idea what she was talking about. At the principal's office she finally explained how I was wearing a marijuana t-shirt. The reason being that the Buc-ee's logo is sometimes just a Buc-ee leaf with or without a nut. After I quickly explained, my teacher called me a liar. Then the principal just kind of sighed and told me I could go back to class and the teacher needed to stay behind. He clearly knew I was in the right. I got a half-hearted apology from her later. In 1st grade, some a-hole during a school assembly dropped a mic and the speakers made a terrifying screeching sound. When the sound finally stopped, me, sitting next to said speaker, muttered, "Thank God it's over." My 1st grade teacher decided that that comment was disrespectful and literally dragged me by the effing arm upstairs to the principal. They got very upset when I refused to apologize and admit to any wrongdoing. F you, Mrs. Finkel. Did you bite your thumb at her, sir? No sir, I bite my thumb, but not at her. Woodshop teacher telling a nation kid he doesn't really need to wear a face shield on the lathe, you know, because of the eyes. He meant it as a joke, but even at 15 we all kind of hushed and looked at each other like, dude, did he just effing say that? Safety squint. When I was 12 my teacher said my knitting had too many errors in it. It had 4 and ripped it to shreds. I was supposed to start all over again, but excused myself and went to the bathroom where I cried for the rest of the lesson. One time we were drawing this part of a photo we saw in art class with a pencil and paper, and my friend wasn't very good at drawing, so the art teacher took it from him and yelled something along the lines of it being a really bloody bad drawing, and ripped/crumpled it up in front of him and the whole class. This was in grade 5 or 6, and of course, my friend was bawling his eyes out. My brother abused me as a child. It started around 3rd or 4th grade, and when I was in 4th grade he held a pocket knife my dad had given him up to my neck. I told my class about it because I was scared. My teacher took me to the hallway and told me, "Don't say those things or you'll be taken away from your family." I never mentioned the abuse to anyone again until 7th grade because of the warning this teacher gave me. It only got worse after the knife incident. You are incompetent, terrible boy who has no decency and will never amount to anything in your life. I'll be surprised if you're even capable of finishing this year, let alone school. Very damaging to 9-year-old me. Just because I'm on a diet doesn't mean I can't look at the menu. Priest in a Catholic high school after he was caught looking down a girl's shirt. Jesus Christ, dude. My brother had a friend whose mother had died the day before, but he still went to school for some reason. He walked into the class late or something, and the teacher asked jokingly, "Did your mum die?" He just said, "Yeah, she did," and left. Man, my dad died unexpectedly when I was doing my A-levels, but somewhat irritatingly did so over the Easter holidays. So the whole thing including funeral was over by the time it was time to get back to school. Anyways, first day in I go to tell my physics teacher that I didn't manage to get my coursework done over the holidays. Now the teacher is a newly qualified, quite young bloke who was very much of a swear and be casual with the kids. "So you are the cool teacher, School of Teaching." Truth be told, I liked the guy and we'd always had a good relationship, and I was known as a lazy student who was often late with work and had feeble excuses, so I can't hold what happened against the man. But I can look back with a certain amount of dark schadenfreude. I go in a few minutes before class and ask to speak to him. He somewhat absent-mindedly said yes, and I informed him I'd not managed to get my course done. He turns to me and says, "Oh, for FS sake, meeting slinkers, what crappy excuse are you gonna feed me this time? You're never gonna get a decent mark if you keep slacking off like this. Sorry sir, but my dad died over the holiday and I've been at the funeral. Never have I seen a man crumble so fast in front of my eyes. You could see the fear of being sued / fired / dragged over the coals flash in his eyes, and he just stuttered an apology and said something like, 'You didn't need to tell me that. It's okay. You could have just said there was trouble at home. Are you okay? Is there anything I can do to help? Do you need time off? How's your family? Have you told the head etc etc.' I explained I was doing okay and that I just needed an extension and that I appreciated his support, and pretty much cajoled him into letting him know I wasn't angry with him. He was totally right to be suspicious of my lack of work, and in any other scenario, that reaction would have been totally appropriate. He just sucked at timing. Not gonna pretend it wasn't funny to watch him squirm though. When I was about 9, our teacher asked the class what we wanted to be when we grew up. One kid said he wanted to be a bin man, a garbage man. For US readers, the teacher went into a rant, saying that jobs like these were for the lowest, most unintelligent people in society, and that he should aspire to be better than that. Finally she asked why he wanted to be a bin man anyway. "Because my dad's one," said the kid, by now in tears. Coming from a garbage man himself. F that teacher. My dad opened up his own sanitation company and he's way smarter than most people I've met. Garbage men's brains are like a freaking GPS to its crazy. Plus, what the F are we gonna do without garbage men? Extremely necessary job. I was always taught to never disrespect a man's livelihood unless it is dishonest. This teacher is an A. A man's work is how he provides for himself and those dependent on him, and not a soul can judge him on that. Obviously this applies to women as well. Not to mention that it is likely a high-paying job depending on where you live. I'm late to the party, but by far the worst thing was what my grade 6 teacher screamed at us. We'd been doing something kids do, probably talking, and she went off at a class of 30 12-year-olds screaming, "I hope you all get your heads bashed in at high school." 9/10th grade teacher. A teacher told the story of when he was working at a girls' summer camp. The showers had broken down, and he had to go fix it for the girls who were mid-shower. They had the girls put their faces to the walls for some reason. Naked bums all along the walls. He told it as if it was a funny anecdote. I was creeped the F out and can't imagine how the girls who were going to said camp felt about the story. The girls couldn't get out temporarily to be fixed. Like that was their better solution. What the F? Might I reiterate? What the F? When I was in high school, a gym teacher came up to me one day towards the end of class when everyone was just kind of freely shooting basketballs and hanging out on the bleachers. I was standing by myself and walked up and asked me something about the neighboring town. He said, "Did you know that in Alni, they used to hang N-words with velvet?" and then just walked away. It was the only time he ever talked to me. I'm white and he was a black guy, maybe 6'8". I think he was in the NBA for one season or something. Everyone loved him, so I guess he was just messing with me, but he got me pretty good. Was this the same teacher who regularly said I didn't get off the slave ship yesterday? Nah, it's the one who would say stuff like, "Oh, hey, tell your mama I said Saturday is fine. You're still UHH. You're still going to a friend's this weekend, right? I'll need MD. Full of teeth claws now." When I was a senior in high school, I had a teacher tell me that if I wanted to kill myself I had to follow the highway, not cross it, while making cutting motions. My 6th form tutor told us the same thing. He used to work as a counselor for recovering drug addicts and had patients commit suicide. Now that I think about, I do hope he didn't give his patients this advice. This is so F-edition. Paraphrasing slightly. But there's no such thing as Asperger's syndrome. This is just attention-seeking behavior, said to me. about me. Admittedly this was over 20 years ago, when not everybody had heard of it, but still I'd had 2 days of tests and brain scans resulting in a long form diagnosis/explanation which my parents had shared with my teachers. Every other teacher basically reacted with, "Oh, so that's why he's so weird. Okay, we can work with this, but not this guy. F you, Mr. M." Unlike his C'ism, which is very real and difficult to cure. Mrs. Noodle, my 3rd grade math teacher, 1987. I missed 2 weeks of school due to a horrible case of chicken pox and fell behind with whatever it was that we were working on. A month after I came back to school, I was still struggling with math, but was too young and scared to ask for help. We had a test that I failed, so Mrs. F.I. Noodle brought my 3rd grade self up to the front of the classroom and shamed me. She told the entire classroom that Buffaho will never succeed in math. I ended up crying and going to the nurse with a stomachache. I'll never forget how awful she was to me, and I struggled with math for the rest of the time that I was in school. That's terrible, and not at all what a teacher should do. I was taking lessons to be a teacher, and one of the first things we learn is if we find a student like this, then we should find a way to get them caught up, not to punish them. This is especially true for subjects that build on themselves linearly, like math. As I pointed out, gaps in knowledge have a way of snowballing out of control if not corrected early. First day on the job, teacher walks in as the new CAD teacher and his name's on the board. It looks like you'd pronounce it a man. He announces right away that it's not, and that you will be thrown out of his class if you call him that. He does roll and gets to a French African name that looks like it might be pronounced for a gay slur starting with F. Does not use better judgment and uses that slur as a last name. It's pronounced Faj. Asman Kid obviously had to deal with this problem his whole life and was not keen on the mix-up. New teacher blows up and is hollering at this 16-year-old who's not backing down. Takes a bit but they both disappear. Teacher was never seen in the building again. This was first period, first day of school. Faj must have been a legend. The original poster. Please tell me his replacement was called Titsman. My 4th grade music teacher told us to shut the F up. She got fired. I taught for a while and there were times I was dangerously close to doing something similar. I'm the other side of the coin. I managed to irritate my pet teacher so much he called me a effing knobhead and hit me with a cricket ball. Male teacher was talking about the dress code to me and a friend of mine during lunch. He stated he doesn't like seeing a bunch of fatties in short shorts, but then gestured towards a thin girl in short shorts walking up the step and said, "But that I don't mind." Had a girl at my school get in huge trouble for her dress one day. It didn't break the dress code on her, and another girl was wearing the exact same dress and it did break it for her. The girl in trouble asked why she was the one being disciplined. Because she looks good in it. That's wrong for several different reasons. First and foremost, it's just plain rude to point at people. Not the worst ever, but it really effed with me. There are literally millions of other cute little Chinese girls just like you that are much better than you and can replace you. Seeing how anyone gestures to teacher can become a teacher these days, you can be replaced easily too. Whoever threw that paper, your mom's a hoe. That's great. As a former teacher, great way to divert the attention back onto yourself. Funny. Offensive. I like it.